Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Fast Tracking AR for Enterprise, from idea directly to deployment. My name is Rebecca Garrity, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing and Content at LansAR, and I'll be today's moderator. Today's webinar will focus on how companies are achieving ROI with augmented reality and how they're doing it faster by skipping proof of concept, getting out of pilot purgatory, and going directly into deployment. Our panel discussion will help you understand what is the real problem of the AR industry today and how are companies skipping the pilot and going direct to production. We'll cover tips for choosing a use case and defining a project plan, and take a look at a real-world example of the company Peter Millar who did this and implemented AR rapidly to achieve big results. Lastly, we'll look at how this applies to other industries and other types of use cases and how you can do this in your business as well. So before we begin, we just wanted to cover a few quick housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a multiple application widget that you can use to control the viewing experience. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the webcast, and you can feel free to submit us questions throughout using that Q&A widget. A copy of today's slide deck plus some additional materials are available in the resource list, and an on-demand version of the webcast will be available in approximately 1 day, which you can access from that same audience link that was sent to you earlier. And if you're having any trouble with sound, just shoot us a question and we'll have our On24 rep make sure that you get clear sound. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's event. You've already met me as the moderator, so let me introduce Seth Patton, who is the CEO and founder of LogistiVIEW. LogistiVIEW is a software company that uses augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and computer vision to improve the productivity and job satisfaction of task-oriented workers on both industrial smart glasses and mobile devices. Over a 15-plus-year career in supply chain software, Seth has developed a vision for improving workforce efficiency that led him to found LogistiVIEW in 2014 and to lead the company to become a pioneer and a leader in the development of connected workforce technology. And our other speaker today is Lance Anderson, CEO of LansAR. LansAR is a market and product strategy consulting firm specializing in augmented reality, who provides enterprise clients with an action plan for their AR deployment. As an industry-leading voice in augmented reality, Lance's expertise in deployment strategy, planning, and execution focuses on deploying AR in the now term, helping enterprises to be successful with AR today. Across leadership roles at companies including Vuzix, Lance has launched, managed, and deployed many of today's market-leading AR hardware and software across a range of diverse industries around the globe. So with that, welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining us, and let's dive right in. So let's start off big picture here. Lance, first of all, welcome. Thanks for being here on the webinar. And can you talk to us a little bit about the state of the AR industry today? When we look at what's going on, why isn't everybody just deploying AR? Why are people getting stuck in pilot? And what's the industry problem that we're seeing?
Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca, and good afternoon, everybody. So I think the problem is likely simple and obvious to most everybody who's attending this webinar. We're all aware that there's hundreds or maybe even thousands of pilots out there of AR technology in the enterprise space, but very few have made it to a true deployment, and even less have been deployed at scale. Right? And we've seen this across many different industries, from manufacturing, we've seen it in logistics, we've seen it in automotive, we've seen it in pharma and retail, and that these companies are getting stuck in pilot purgatory for a myriad of reasons. And let's before we get into that, let's define a little bit about differentiating between a POC, a pilot, and production. So if a POC, or proof of concept, is defined as the process or goal of proving out a workflow, feasibility of something, or an ROI model, I think we all do that regardless of whether it's emerging technology, existing technologies. Really any business solution, you generally do a proof of concept, either on a piece of paper, in a conference room, or actually out on the production floor. A pilot, in and of itself, should be defined as the act of proving out a new technology. And really what I would put to this audience is that I truly believe that the AR technology, it has been proven over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, meaningfully in the enterprise space. It's really no longer a question of, does augmented reality really work, or is there a real ROI, or will the workforce actually accept this technology? I think we're all beyond that. And really the question, and probably why most of us are on the call today, is with all of those foregone conclusions, why aren't we deploying at scale? Why aren't we getting out of the pilots, what we call pilot purgatory, and getting into deployments? So I would define pilot purgatory as, companies are getting stuck due to hurdles such as IT and security issues, user acclimation questioning, budgets, real ROI concerns, operational issues, and things like that. And everybody's getting stuck here because they're in pilots and they're running against these questions and are not deployed. So deployment in and of itself will alleviate these companies of many of these problems, right? When you make it real, however small your deployment is, when it's real, that means IT has to actually deploy a secured environment for you. When it's real, your users don't get to complain about something new. They have a tool that they have to acclimate and use. When your operations folks and your C-level look at this technology, they have to have a plan for what if it actually works, right? So honestly, by not going into production, many companies are unnecessarily continuing to pilot rather than deploy. They're getting stuck in pilot purgatory. They're wasting time, missing this low-hanging fruit ROI. And frankly, many have lost their purpose. Why are they piloting? Again, innovative technology is there to solve a problem and to drive a business improvement. And as we say, if you have not deployed, well, then you really haven't innovated. And that's what you need to keep reminding yourself of that to avoid pilot purgatory.
So that raises a number of interesting points, and kind of taking that to the next step then, if we're looking at the difference between a pilot and a production in that way, we're making the case that AR has been proven and no longer needs to be proven. Seth, can you talk to us a little bit about why people should look at the journey this way, why people should be thinking about skipping the pilot and going direct to production?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Rebecca. This is an age-old discussion, particularly in any business scenario, is driving consensus, driving adoption, driving a belief in a technology and in a path forward that will actually generate real, tangible results. And that's sometimes something we talk a great deal about, but something we spend, unfortunately, not nearly enough time doing. And so what we end up recommending is evaluating these new technologies, piloting, going slow, and as a result, that lack of focus causes the delay, it causes the lost opportunity. What we believe at LogistiVIEW is that it's really important to have decisive action and take decisive action. Taking decisive action is so critical to driving intentional improvement and driving intentional advancement, regardless, again, of how big that particular advancement is. It also drives a clarity of purpose. Lance's discussion about coordinating the teams and making sure that everyone understands this is being done for a reason. It's being done to improve some aspect of the business. Without that level of clarity, there's just not enough buy-in to drive forward motion. So we strongly recommend decisive action because it draws forward motion. And as a result, it drives time to value. Many of us have spent years, ourselves included, working in pilot pilot technology environments, and our customers tell us that they're looking forward to the solution, driving value in the future. And what we find is that conversation happens repeatedly, over and over and over again, because while we all want a positive end result, it's hard to necessarily keep that momentum moving forward until they gain internal consensus, so to speak, to make a forward motion. And so direct deployment equals rapid time to value. It's a way to make the ROI that's theoretical, that we talk about all the time, real. And sometimes perhaps not necessarily on a grandiose scale. So one of the other things that I constantly talk to people about is, why are you shooting for transformational when transformational, by definition, requires you to change everything about your business? That's sometimes too much to go for, and change management is not an easy topic, especially the larger your organization gets, the more complex the operation gets. changing everything is sometimes basically the antithesis of forward motion, because it causes so much concern and so much stress that it basically causes indecision. So instead, we say start small and start real. AR is definitely a new technology. It's an emerging technology that has incredible promise. But what we're seeing is that by starting small and starting real, some of our customers are actually getting to that promise much faster and much more real than even some of our largest customers, for whom the opportunity could be even bigger if they move forward. And once you've gone forward with a reasonable start small, start real, it sets you up for incremental improvement. Incremental improvement in deployment model, I think, is critical for anything. Continuous improvement is sort of an objective, and truthfully, because it's continuous, it's a process that never stops. But that kind of process is how we achieve the small gains that drive towards the end of these large advancements a substantial ROI, a substantial improvement in the overall business that maybe didn't all happen in one go-live event. Maybe it took place over several years. But now you're seeing 7, 8-figure savings in labor costs, or significant increase in accuracy, or time to customer shipment. All of these various factors are significantly improved when you take a smart but continuous process.
So, I mean, what you're basically saying, when you take the idea of the start small, start real, it sounds like what you're saying is that the way to get the bigger returns is actually to take some of these smaller steps, which is very interesting for people that look at augmented reality and other types of disruptive technologies. We're always kind of in this disruptive world thinking of disruptive things as a good thing, and usually that involves this huge leap, transformational leap. So it sounds like what you're saying instead is that actually these smaller steps can have this different type of road that actually gets you that ROI, that instead of waiting out on a huge transformational, 800 million gain, people can be missing the 200 million gain that they could get by going smaller. Is that the idea here?
Yes, definitely. I think there's really a key factor here is to recognize that that the opportunity is, the big opportunities are always the hardest to achieve. And so if we focus exclusively on achieving the maximum ROI, in terms of dollars, but perhaps not in terms of percentages, and focusing on trying to change everything before we optimize the process that's the lowest hanging fruit, it tends to get us focused in the wrong places, and unfortunately, during that time where we're deliberating, we're losing ROI. It's lost opportunity.
So that this path can be a different way to get there and ultimately get the bigger route to scaling. Interesting. So
indeed.
I guess let's turn now and talk about some of the specifics on how you would do that. So for somebody that wants to have a journey like we're describing here, Lance, talk to us a little bit about where they would start. How would they go about selecting a use case? How would they go about defining and mapping out a project plan to get there?
Right, so if you're going to take our mantra of starting small and starting real, the key is to choose the right problem to solve. So AR can solve a lot of problems, and I'm sure most everybody on this call's business has a lot of problems. So it's not a lack of problems to solve, right? So companies need to focus on solving problems that AR solutions can make an impact on really very quickly within your current business cycle, or AR for the now term, as we call it, right? So if you're looking to take an AR solution direct to production, the key is to focus your initial solution on something that's actually deployable and valuable to your organization, right? So something that you can do on the smart glass hardware that's actually available today, commercially available today. An AR software that is, again, available today and doesn't require some future development to enable into your business, right? Also look at applications where your data, so the availability of data is maybe already there through your current process, only requires a slight visual manipulation, or really doesn't need extensive AR visual rework, right? So the data is there, it's ready to be used, and focus on something that can be deployed preferably alongside your current operation, right? So something where you don't have to go in on Sunday, stop your existing process, and completely transform your workforce onto AR smart glasses and a new process, right? So the risk there is too great, and it's really unnecessary. If you can deploy something that works on top of or alongside of your existing operation, it's much more easy to prove it out, to roll it into production, and then scale it out from there. And frankly, one of the things, just don't underestimate the power of being in live production, right? The stakes are real for your IT department, right, to make things safe and secure and enable the data to flow between the glasses and back to your data pools, right? It's also real for the workers, right? And they actually really do try to acclimate, and they try to use this new tool because this is now their real work. This is real. It's not an opportunity for them to complain about a new technology with fear of change, right? This is your tool. You need to work on it today. Acclimate. And again, for the operations in the C-level, they're going to make the investment in this deployment. For the operations folks, it's going to be real, and this equates to boxes out the door or cars off the line or bags on a plane. And for the C-level, they need measurable results, and they need a plan. If these results are really good, they need a plan to move forward, and what do you do next, right? So again, solving the right problem. The above process, or the process that I lay out here, really ensures that you don't get caught with no path forward, right? That's the key to avoiding pilot purgatory. And I guess another way to say it is like this. Don't fail fast, right? Rather, succeed fast. And that's an element here that's really important. So make small decisions. Don't get locked down. Course correct quickly. Right? That'll get you into production so that you can avoid the hurdles that show up when you do pilots. And these hurdles disappear when you're in real production. People talk about AR as a disruptive technology, or that AR will be transformational. And, we wholeheartedly agree with that. But that doesn't happen overnight. And Seth touched on this before. You really don't necessarily have to disrupt your entire business just to implement AR. Right? So a small deployment that eliminates the hurdles for the next deployment. It fosters the ideas from your internal team. It loosens budget dollars for maybe more complex data projects that are required, and it prepares your company for the iterative and continuous deployment of AR solutions. That's really what leads to scale, Rebecca.
That's really interesting, especially the idea that if you're not solving a real problem or you're not connecting into real data, are you actually going to be in a position to know what the real issues are along that route, if you're doing that in an isolated environment like we see sometimes with pilots? So given that, Seth, kind of coming at this from the standpoint of what you're seeing as LogistiVIEW and what you're seeing with clients that you're working with, how are you guys going about this? How are you able to accelerate this rapid path to production in the types of things that clients are facing?
Well, I think the number one factor is in purpose-built enterprise software that leverages augmented reality as a tool. So LogistiVIEW is built as a workforce optimization platform from the ground up, not as a technology play to introduce AR, but rather as the continuation of a vision that I've kind of had all along for how augmented reality as a technology could improve and solve problems in logistics, supply chain, frontline labor, retail, manufacturing, places where people have jobs to do and they have tasks they need to follow, standard operating procedures, and they also have they have data that's important to them. And so one of the first things we built is we built upon this idea that it has to be configurable. Every one of you on the phone has your own operational process. You have hundreds, thousands of them potentially that are critical to the success of your business. Every one of you has a different business for various reasons. There's no point in building a quote-unquote standard product, best practice solution that is inflexible to any of the individual needs of your business. You need to have the ability to support customized workflows. And so LogistiVIEW was built around this concept that we are going to provide the framework for augmented reality in the workforce, but we're not going to lock you into a process that is really impossible for your business. Rather, we're going to give you the tools through our workflow editor, as seen in this this screenshot, to literally flowchart your process and then turn that into an augmented reality experience for your workforce. And where augmented reality can help drive the decision-making process, then we're going to leverage it there. Which comes into our next point. Augmented reality visualizations don't have to be complicated. If you look at the screenshot, do you have any question where this guy's supposed to go, what he's supposed to be focusing on? The answer is almost 100% no. No, I know exactly what he's supposed to be focusing on. Why? Because it's simple. And the whole point of it is that it's supposed to be simple. Ideally, frontline workers have to answer 1,000 simple questions every day, but if we can help them make better decisions with augmented reality, then we can improve the speed with which those decisions occur, and we can improve the accuracy of those decisions, thereby driving efficiency and accuracy in your operations. So simplicity is a key factor. It also drives down the complexity of content generation. Content generation is a constant topic in AR. You go into overly complicated scenarios and you spend millions of dollars potentially driving content that then immediately has to be redone the next time you have a major product renovation. It just becomes unsustainable. So how can we build AR into a business model that's sustainable for our customers? That's something that LogistiVIEW is focused very heavily on. We've also kind of intentionally built a process that was designed around our experience in the implementation of other existing legacy systems on the market. Our team has great familiarity in terms of project management and development, so we built the solution around the ideas that we've used from past experience. How do we handle things like configuration, testing, user training and acclimation? All of these things are pretty important factors in the success of a project. Change management is important in the success of a project. So how can the software solution drive change management in a successful direction so that all of your businesses can actually adopt this new technology and be successful with it versus adopting the new technology and being stuck in a non-productive state. So it's important to drive operational IT and third-party vendor buy-in. That unity of purpose drives the decisive action I was talking about earlier. It's important to design a work process. Don't just copy the existing process. Take advantage of this new technology and design something that's different. Why do we want it to be different? We want it to be different because it has to be better. Otherwise, why are we doing it? So all of that kind of thought process and that kind of mindset, we encourage our customers to go down that path so that by the time we design a technical integration, it's simple but robust, and it's designed for the simplest approach that can be live, productive, but be prepared to scale. And then we take that directly to the users who have a simple process that they can go through. So once they understand the process, once they understand how to put on a pair of glasses, then they can go straight into deployment. And that process can be extremely rapid. And that's actually one of the things that I think is important. Rapid time to value. Not only are we bringing new technology to the market with AR, reasonably, we should also be bringing new simplicity of enterprise technology to the market. We should be looking at ways that we can change our mindset around enterprise technology to make it so that it's not necessarily a multi-year complex process. Instead, we have the tools to start small and continuously iterate improvement so that you're always moving in the right direction. And the right direction is always a little bit better than we were before. And in the end, everyone wants an arrow that continuously goes up and to the right. And that ultimately is the process. You don't want a flat line that then suddenly jumps to another flat line. You have to be open to and adopt the idea that going through this is a continuous process. And if you have the right technology, then that makes that continuous improvement easy and not nearly as costly as some of the technologies that you may be used to today.
So kind of taking some of the things that you said and looking at when you're aligning all these factors in an organization to build a project plan like that. You talked about the importance of the simplicity and the type of AR visualizations being a key part. You talked about the risk mitigation. You talked about the team element and the workflow design element. Can we go into the importance of aligning the members of the team? Because obviously people are looking at how to get approval for these types of things. Can you dig into that a little bit as well, of when you're approaching that project plan, how to get that unity of purpose so that as a team you can make that leap into decisive action rather than dipping your toes in a pilot and a POC, et cetera?
Definitely. I mean, I think the number one factor is pretty straightforward. you should have a business case. You should have a target. If you don't know where you're going and you don't have any plan for how to get there, there's no way that once you reach your destination, you can quantify how successful the process was. And so having that, starting with an achievable objective, and then getting buy-in on that objective typically allows for a clear path that every member of the team who has to be involved can then get behind and understand. Now, sometimes that is a drag along because of urgency and executive mandate. Sometimes that is a collaboration between an IT team who recognizes an opportunity and the ops team who sees the opportunity as well and presents it jointly to an executive board for approval. However you happen to structure that process and wherever you happen to be in the organization, what your end goal is to define a process that's achievable, and then define who's responsible for each step in the or each share of ownership in the execution of the project, and then also do it in a way that allows forward motion to be constantly visible. Trying to plan something out that takes 3 years when the technology itself feels new and we know that everything is going to change, oftentimes those kinds of projects end up getting bogged down. But we're about to talk in a case study about how we propose rapid time to value, rapid time to deployment, and it presents a little bit different than what many of you have probably experienced in your world.
Sure. So let's lead into that. I mean, let's take a look at how all these concepts we're talking about come into play in real life with this example. So this was a client of yours?
Yeah. So the client that we're talking about today is a company called Peter Millar. They are a luxury apparel retailer, and they have a rapidly growing business with a particularly rapidly growing e-commerce channel. And so over the last several months, we have been able to rapidly deploy LogistiVIEW to provide flexible automation and dynamic capacity for their facility, something that was critical for them to achieve the results that they are looking for. And so the number one problem was simply that they are growing. Some of you have that problem. Growth is a good problem to have, but it is nonetheless a problem. And so what they needed to do was find a new way to solve that problem. I'm pushing a video now that kind of explains what they see on their conveyor on a day-to-day basis. Now, these are obviously all orders that are being targeted for fairly large distribution, either to retail stores or to pro shops in the golf world where their primary customer base is. But you'll notice that these are all fairly large boxes. They also have a sizable e-commerce channel where that order profile drops down significantly to only a few units per box. And so what they needed to do was find a way to get all of those small boxes off of the conveyor system. And they needed to do it with what they wanted to do is do it with a put wall. And so a put wall is a common automation technology in the industry, certainly in warehousing. But what they wanted to do was try and do it a different way. They wanted to do it without bolting anything to the floor and without bolting anything to a shelf. And they wanted to do it with complete flexibility so that if they wanted to change their operations, as their business changed, they could do that rapidly with software configuration. And so in the end, their objective was to achieve completely flexible automation and be able to drive a significant increase in the overall productivity and throughput of their warehouse without actually changing anything in terms of their floor layout. And so what they were able to do, and you see a video here showing this process, we were able to create a put wall for them that allowed them to batch pick all of those orders and then deliver them to to a put wall and do it all with smart glasses without having to bolt anything to a shelf. And the end result was a significant flexibility that they were able to gain, while not having to invest significant upfront capital or go through the disruption of having a building permit and electrical lines and networking lines that typically are associated with fixed hardware. So the implementation process was actually very, very rapid. So this video actually shows what the work process actually is in terms of how they operate in the warehouse. We were able to drive this work process and show it to their operators within about 3 weeks of discussing the original plan, because we were able to build and configure the workflow in our process designer. And then the users were able to learn quickly about how to use the glasses within a matter of a few minutes and adapt and adopt the technology very rapidly. It felt natural to them, and in the end, they liked it better than the previous approach, which was using an RF handheld device. And so as a result, the entire process of their e-commerce picking has been dramatically improved and increased efficiency, because we now have the ability to bring products in those little tiny boxes you see there. Instead of throwing those on the conveyor, we're now bringing them to a put wall where they can be packed out much more efficiently. The other neat part about the implementation process is how fast it went. We went from problem identification all the way through this implementation timeline. And if you're familiar with implementing many other enterprise solutions, you'll notice much of this looks very much like any other enterprise software package. The only thing that's different is that because of the solution and because of the methodology that we can bring to the table as a result of it, we were actually able to go from initial contract to go live in production in only 67 days. And that was with an integration to a third-party WMS vendor. The end result was a pretty substantial impact for them, reducing overall 15% load on their conveyor within the first month of the implementation, which allowed them to make their increased numbers that were coming in through their e-commerce channel in their peak season. Overall inventory touches were reduced dramatically, and ultimately they were able to deliver faster on their direct-to-consumer business. The other advantage significantly was the just simplicity of training. It really does not take much to understand the process. And so therefore, the team was able to understand it and adopt it very comfortably within a matter of just a few minutes.
So we sort of looked at this example here. Obviously, this is an example in a warehouse. The use case here was picking and putting. So it sounds like the way that Peter and Millar approached this was they had a very clear problem that they were looking to solve. Is that right? Was that sort of the starting point here?
Absolutely. The clear problem is a critical factor. It drove their collective desire to move forward with intent. And I think that's the important part, is if you have a reason to do it, if you're not piloting just for the sake of piloting, if you find a reason that you can actually benefit from this technology, then it becomes much easier to get everyone on the same page and drive value very quickly.
And so the question that occurs with sort of this entire conversation that we're having, and feel free to come in on this as well, Lance, when we're talking about, in some cases, start small, start real, and then we're talking about examples that are as short as 90 days, if somebody were to raise the question of, are these pilots by another name? If somebody's looking to start small but expand later, is that just a pilot by a different name?
A resounding no. And the difference is, however small you are, being in production makes everything real. The users are real, the results are real, you've gone through a whole bunch of hurdles, and now you can improve your process and improve your bottom line. You can improve your process and improve your service level agreement. You can improve your process and turn a plane around on the tarmac faster, right? So it's very different. And then your user base will start to innovate for you, right? So it's not a bunch of folks in a conference room doing this. It's people using your technology, actually delivering your results, and using this technology to do things even better, faster, stronger, or more accurate than before. And I think it's important for everybody else on the webinar that we kind of pull out of the warehouse a little bit here. I mean, it's a great example, but I do think that this formula does apply to a lot of other industries. If we're talking about start small and start real, okay, let's talk about manufacturing, all right? So you don't necessarily have to look at your highly educated, complex worker doing a detailed work on a big engine or something like that. But think about things like assembly or a kitting process, right, where the task might be repeatable, but actually it's the small differences in these mundane tasks that are a huge risk for error due to worker mental fatigue, right? So these are maybe simple processes, right? And again, start small. The data here for these things, it's already there. It's on a piece of paper or a fixed screen that they're using. And the visuals don't, again, need to be an exploded view of a 5,000 piece engine, right? Visuals are arrows or dots or boxes, right? Not full-on renderings, right? And the process of deploying this in a live production in manufacturing, you can kind of go over the top of the existing process or work alongside of it, right? So all of those hurdles are gone, even in manufacturing. If we talk, again, about picking the right problem to solve first, let's take it out to, let's talk about the airline industry. We'll go outside of manufacturing. Talk about cargo loading and unloading, right? Where you only have about 45 minutes to turn a plane around on tarmac. And you're dealing with the ability to load specific items or unload, probably more prevalently, unload specific items for a plane, or reprioritize your loading process due to real changes on the tarmac. Right now, you've got a piece of paper that all you know is outdated. Again, the data's already there. You can go over top of the existing process, and something like this, a simple project, AR project like this, enables immediate gains and measurable gains. And it gets through all the IT and security hurdles, and the next use cases start to pop up everywhere. So beyond that, transportation, think about the last mile. In retail, shelf stocking, planogram, right, where you want to lay everything out correctly on your shelves, less than case restock. For 3PLs, this type of AR stuff, AR application on smart glasses, it can be CapEx instead of OpEx, and really enable flexible automation where you really can't afford to put in fixed automation. And now you can start dealing with your seasonal peaks, your temporary workforce, and your short contract timelines. And lastly, I'd even say for pharma, right? There's a lot of opportunity in the pharmaceutical industry, whether it's your e-pedigree, material movements, your need to capture tons of data, or just the fact that almost every order has different specifics and data capture requirements to meet compliance. This gets really simple in the glasses. So just to kind of wrap it out, I'd say that all these problems can be solved by AR hardware that's available today and the software that's available today, enabled by do-it-yourself workflows and simple AR visuals. All of these use cases require minimal data manipulation, minimal operational disruption, but can bring real and immediate ROI to the operations and the C-suite. In other words, we're talking about AR for now-term business results. Skip the pilot and instead focus on deploying innovation that will lead to long-term iterative scale deployment. This is the real path to success for AR in the enterprise, as far as I'm concerned.
And one of the questions that occurs to me as we look at some of these examples, whether it's Peter Millar or whether it's any of these other industries, it probably would be fair to say that companies have more than one thing they want to solve for. And Seth, I'm assuming Peter Millar had more things that they would be interested in applying this type of technology to solve for. But it sounds like the difference is that choosing to start with one of these things, choosing the starting point, seems to make all the difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rebecca. I think that the thing that's important to recognize is that choosing the starting point is the choice to stop waiting. It's the choice to take decisive action. And once you take that decisive action, it becomes a lot easier to make progress. In the case of Peter Millar, yes, we started with a put wall, but we're already working with them to expand the use of LogistiVIEW through additional workflows into other parts of their operation. And so by doing that, we can allow them, again, with the right technology, it really helps make this process a lot easier. If they know they can build whatever work process that they want to build, and that they can do that in a relatively short period of time that doesn't require extensive rework to the solution that they might already have in place, then it allows them to be more flexible. It allows them to plan and open their minds to new possibilities. And so they're coming to us actually on a practically weekly basis, saying, "Hey, what about this? Could we try? Could we try doing this here? Could we deploy visuals in this way to change another process in our facility?" And we see that across our entire customer base. And Peter Millar is a great example, but it goes deeper across every industry. I mentioned manufacturing, logistics, and retail. Our customer base has fantastic ideas, and they come to us with those ideas all the time. And so trying to determine what to do next is often an example or often an evaluation of what's the next lowest hanging fruit, and then starting down that path. But in the end, what we really try to do is enable any work process that a customer wants to bring to us. And as a result, it drives powerful value for a business. We use simple work or simple visuals, but don't require expensive content creation. That reduces time to value. We have the ability to configure rapid workflows that, again, reduce time to value. And the trend here is we're trying to allow you to reach and succeed faster than necessarily previous technologies that you've tried. And I think that's a key factor in AR in general. As you introduce this new idea, this new way of interacting with the world into your operations, understanding exactly where it's going to provide the highest value is sometimes a bit difficult. You may try something that you think is going to be a slam dunk, and it turns out to be kind of a dud. But it doesn't really cost you an arm and a leg, so it's actually okay. But then you may have a frontline worker come to you and say, hey, what if we did this? Would it be possible to do this? And you then have the opportunity to rapidly move forward and try it out. And the end result is that this new process is actually a slam dunk because it drives some significant innovation in your business process. And so from that perspective, empowering businesses by creating a connected worker platform that ultimately you own, to create a process that you own, to create a continuous improvement environment that you own, is the objective of LogistiView's connected worker platform. We're trying to drive value in all the places where businesses are most challenged with change management today, and reduce the challenges of change management, reduce the challenges of trying new processes, so that you can see iterative value in your business, and ultimately improve the productivity and job satisfaction of your workforce. And that's really what it's all about. It's about improving the productivity and job satisfaction of your workforce. That's a good thing for you. It's a good thing for your people, and ultimately, it's a good objective for technology. So that's where we try to come from.
Interesting. Yeah, I think kind of all in all, it sounds like if you sort of look at everything we've talked about on a macro level and then map it back to some of these examples, it's kind of a mindset shift. It's about a different way of thinking of where to start in order to know where to go. That's a little bit different than kind of what we're typically used to hearing. So thank you both for that very interesting discussion. And now we're going to move to some Q&A. So one of the first questions that we have, and people can feel free to type questions into the chat box, is we had a question about, on the hardware level, what is the impact on the workers as far as health and safety and using smart glasses? Are there complaints about getting dizzy after a certain time of usage? Are there complaints about user adoption? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question, Rebecca, and it's a question that comes up all the time. In fact, I would argue it's one of the most common questions I hear. Are my people going to get sick as a result of this? And the answer is no. Now, let me be clear. It's possible to make yourself sick with smart glasses, just like it's possible to make yourself sick in a roller coaster or by driving your car like a crazy person. It's all about how you wear the device and how you focus on the device and the ergonomics of the device. So there's also a very real fact that not every device is best suited for every situation. We definitely, when we deploy our hardware, we focus on the ergonomics of the eyepiece. The position of the display in a person's field of vision is very important. And if you can put that display in someone's field of vision below the horizon, in essence like the dashboard of your car, rather than above the horizon, above your eye, where you end up having to look up and, worse yet, sometimes even to the right. If you look up and to the right on a regular basis, even when you're walking down the street, it'll make you feel woozy. That's why people typically focus on the horizon or below the horizon. That's why we don't hold books up above our head. It's natural for humans to see things in the position below their eye. And so when you train your workers how to use the device, And then when you make sure you have the right device that has the ergonomics necessary to drive that comfort level, then no, we've never had a single user reject our solution on the right pair of glasses because of being sick.
Okay. And we also had a question about the cost of the solution.
Okay. Any specifics on that question, or just in general, how much does it cost?
I think people are, so to clarify that a little bit more, I think people are questioning about, the cost of the general approach that we're talking about here, of starting small versus looking at a bigger picture road. What potential costs are there along those lines from a preventative standpoint?
Definitely. Okay, that makes good sense. Well, there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, and it depends how big your deployment is. I can tell someone on the phone that it's starts off at as low as $25,000, and I can tell someone else on the phone that it's going to be a $3 million project. It depends how big your company is and how many people you have working on working in your operations. But in general, what I would say is this: by comparison to other common technologies such as RF devices, voice devices, warehouse management systems, inventory management systems, things like that, our technology is actually a little bit less expensive typically than what you would experience in previous mobile workforce technologies. And generally, that's a result of simplicity of implementation. Implementation cost is significantly lower than in comparison to kind of a more familiar technologies that you've worked with. And I think too the overall approach of not having significant upfront capital expense associated with with automation equipment and things like that. It helps to focus on just driving value out of the people in your operation rather than having to drive value out of the objects in your operation.
Rebecca, I'd say this too. If the question is also about the cost of starting small, in terms of, well, I've got to hook up my WMS data to your system to start with 2 workers or 200 workers, or I have to get IT to bring my one pair of glasses online is almost the same amount of effort as security-wise to get 200 glasses online. We get all that, and that goes back to 2 things. Number one, picking the right project to start with and the right project to solve, which in effect minimizes that, but also implement a small-scale production with the absolute 100% intent to scale that up. So I'm not saying pick a warehouse that only has 4 workers. Mm-hmm. I'm saying pick an aspect of your 400-worker warehouse that you can start with 4 or 5 workers. Absolutely. With the intent to go to 400. If you have no intent to ever scale beyond those 4 users, then you're right. You have to balance the savings from those 4 workers using AR versus all those costs. Right. And that's what I mean by getting the C-suite involved in this and saying, okay, if this works small, we will fund everything, and we're going to put a little money down to make sure that we do this right.
Yeah, and I think too, it's worth recognizing that integration. One of the advantages of a platform like LogistiVIEW is that integration is a one-time activity, and so and workflow design. That initial step, at least for the first deployment of 5 to 50 to 100, however many people you happen to be wanting to start with, that is a one-time fee, and the cost of it doesn't go up as you deploy more devices. So if you start with an integration approach that is simplistic and small, and instead of having 100 touch points, you have 4 critical touch points, then that cost stays very, very low to get that initial time to value. And then you can expand from there. And if that requires additional IT work or things like that, then yes, that comes along later in the road. But starting small does not require significant investment because it can go very quickly and it can be very simple.
Okay, and we had a question come in that sort of continues that line of thought. What do you say to somebody that says, in my company, I don't see our operations team accepting this without it being proven out. They'll think it's too much of a risk. So how would you address that kind of concern?
I think there's always going to be people who are concerned about the risk. Operations people especially are logically risk averse. Their job is to make sure that everything happens predictably every single time. And so we absolutely recognize that. that's part of why we recommend the side-by-side deployment approach. Because the ops team, if they are, certain folks in the ops team are objecting to this concept, but we can show that side by side with a simple deployment methodology that the workers who are using the new technology are, in 4% more efficient than the workers who are using the old technology, then it becomes a much clearer path forward. And so that is one of the reasons why we've designed this to sit on top of information systems, not replace them, and to sit on top of even automation systems and not necessarily replace them. So we can integrate with the existing WCS that you have or the existing WMS you have, and if you want to keep on running the RF devices or the the light bars or the tablets that you happen to be using today for some part of your operation, that's perfectly fine. But you can take the AR solution and the new workflow that this technology enables and gain rapid value with the users that you start with.
Okay. And then we have a question about timeline. So what is the typical timeline from the first initial discovery call to actually having it deployed in full operation?
So that varies by customer, definitely, but our most successful customers are seeing somewhere between 60 and 120 days. So really, you're looking at a 2 to 4 month timeline.
Definitely rapid. So we have some people also asking about the workflow platform a little bit more. Who within the company typically creates those processes to make that workflow and keeps them updated as time goes forward and process changes, and also about connecting back into data systems?
Well, it starts with the templates that we provide. So most companies are going to start with what we would call a standard workflow that they can then customize. Ultimately, the folks who are responsible for changing or maintaining the workflows themselves are probably a slightly technical super user or a kind of an IT analyst role who has a little bit of knowledge of data. It's not going to be your ops manager who has no experience with technology. It's not quite that simple. We hope to get there one day, but it doesn't require someone with a computer science degree either. And so that's a role that your typical IT analyst, which many of you have on staff, would certainly be able to take over and own.
Okay, then we have a question about use cases. So somebody is asking here, are there about 2 or 3 use cases where this makes sense every time to use this type of technology, and what would those be?
2 or 3 cases where it makes sense every time. I think that's. So I don't like making blanket statements about enterprise, because the second I say it makes sense for one of you will remind me that I'm wrong. But in general, we see that in a manufacturing operation where you are trying to make sure your inventory is in the right position, things like that, very very often a no-brainer. In a warehouse where you're looking to pick accurately, where you're looking to sort accurately, where you're looking to audit packaging, very very frequently, it's a no-brainer. You go into even like a retail store, back of house stock management, or even in-store picking, things like that. If any of you have ever been into a store watching the in-store picking process, it could be so much more efficient if the technology was just a little bit more friendly for that retail associate who has no experience as a picker. So how can we drive value in those types of situations where we take low-skilled workers to moderately skilled workers and give them better information to make more informed decisions, and then improve the outcomes from their work? Those are the kinds of places where we really see kind of no-brainer use cases.
Okay. So we have a very interesting question here. Somebody is asking, the component of a successful innovation is validation and testing in a sizable quantity. So does a quick deployment overlook that principle?
I would argue that is only relevant if you're replacing the entire operation all at once. If I were telling you that you should rip out everything you have and replace it with our technology tomorrow, then yes, that's probably something that is worth considering. But what I would say is that the industry as a whole, smart glasses as a whole, and AR as a whole has had, to Lance's point earlier, many kind of runs through the gamut, so to speak. And so the technology itself is probably not the part that you would want to be testing out. What you really want to be testing out is the validity of the work process. And the validity of the work process is going to be just as important if you're using smart glasses as it is if you're using Telnet. Either way, your operators still have to be doing the right thing to do their job. And so I think that applies to just about anything, not just our technology. What I still recommend, just because it's logical, is that you don't try and turn over everything overnight, because at that point you do run the risk of shutting everything down overnight, which is not something that's not something we recommend. There's a better way.
Absolutely. So then we have another question about, on an organizational level, who for the most part do you find being the biggest champion for implementing AR solutions? And on the other side of that, then who do you see being the biggest inhibitors?
So I have an interesting perspective here. Believe it or not, the operations team are our biggest champions because they see things that make their lives easier. There are certainly people who are scared or risk averse, as one might say, but generally our champions within our customer base are the operations team. I would say and also I might add the end users themselves. The end users themselves have given us phenomenal feedback about just the simplicity of the way that we give them instructions. And they talk about how cool it is that it's easy to do their job, that it's easy for them to understand what they need to understand. So I think that's an important piece of feedback. I think the place we see the most challenge is potentially with IT, when they don't feel like they have a good understanding of how complicated it will be to support our product. And so we do see that a lot. I think that's probably not just LogistiVIEW. I think there's other companies in this industry that share that similar problem. In general, the IT group wants to make sure that they're not going to have a headache every 30 seconds that they have to answer a call for. And we've been able to work pretty closely with our customers to make the IT team feel pretty comfortable that it's not going to be the end of the world.
I jump in here, Rebecca, and say, I don't look at IT as the big, bad, dark no in every company. They're actually an enablement department for you, right? So I think the problem is, and this is purely a difference between going into pilots and going to production. In a pilot environment, you don't have to tell anyone from IT that you're doing anything.
That's true,
right? And what happens is you come out of the pilot and you're all excited and you just sneak up on IT, right? And they know things that you don't know. That's just the reality.
Yep.
If you bring this opportunity and you want to take it right to production, IT becomes part of your team.
Agreed.
Right?
Absolutely.
Operations is part of your team.
Yeah.
Your workers, bringing in your train the trainer, your best worker, they become part of the team. And it's that team environment that Seth touched on a little while ago that production brings to bear that pilots don't.
Absolutely.
And it's a real key aspect and one of the biggest difference that why going straight to production is significantly more successful in the long term for a company than going into a pilot.
That's absolutely valid.
Interesting. So I think as we just get the last round of questions in here, is there kind of a lasting thought that both of you would like to leave us with as we look back over, everything we've looked at across the industries, across the use cases, across what we're seeing for AR today of people wanting to do this journey?
So my final thought here is, we've resonated a few things, start small, start fast, start real, that kind of stuff. And my last point about the difference between a pilot and production is very important. What I think for everybody on this call is, although you saw most of the use case and the use case we showed here, Peter Millar, being in a warehouse, don't think of it as a warehouse. Think of it as a problem to solve. What is your simple problem to solve for data? What is your most important problem to solve for your operations? What's going to drive value to your bottom line? Focus on that with the technology, the hardware and software that's available today. And you're going to be able to magical things for your company in the future. And you're going to set a stage for your company of continuous AR innovation and continuous improvement. The hardware is going to change over time quickly. Software is going to change over time. But if you have this mindset in your company, and once you get it started, you'll be able to have a competitive advantage over your peer companies.
And I think that's, from a LogistiVIEW specific perspective, I think what it really comes down to is everyone. I mean, we talk to hundreds of companies, and everyone's interested. Everyone wants to understand how how smart glasses, how augmented reality, how just changing the way you interface with your business systems can improve your operations. And there's a lot of great discussions, but a lot of just lack of clarity. And so that's where I say find a use case that you believe has potential. That's what Peter Millar did. They came to us with the use case that they believed had potential and said, "Hey, we think this could be done with your technology. What do you think?" And we were able to rapidly drive that forward based on their initial gut feeling that this was the right solution. And once they saw the solution, I had been talking with their director of operations for a year about this technology. And once he saw the specific need that would help him solve a specific problem, it became very real very fast. And then all of a sudden they drove directly forward to make significant and substantial gains in their business. And so I think every one of us probably has something in our business that can be like that as well. And so what I would say is, don't look for the absolute grand slam. If you're going to hit, you can't hit a grand slam without first hitting a few singles. Someone's got to get on base somehow. And so if you start looking for the grand slam, you're never going to get it. But if you start with a few singles, you'll eventually be able to hit the grand slam. And sometimes, in the end, what it is the singles that set you up for all of the opportunity that you'll find in the future when something small and something else small come together to make something phenomenal.